Welcome to the Accelerating Operational Performance Look Back or Rewind episode. I'm Greg Schinkel, President of Unique Training and Development, Frontline Leadership Systems, joined by Kirk Langford, our General Manager.
Yeah, we get together. They let us out of our individual cages to hang out a little bit.
That's right. Normally, of course, Kirk does the Leader Feeder podcast, and I do the Accelerating Operational Performance, and this is our crossover episode.
That's right. We get to hang out a little bit and take a look back at some of the episodes that we've enjoyed and that the viewers have enjoyed, and just discuss what we think people liked about them and what we liked about them, which is cool. So let's dive right in. So the very first one that I wanted to chat about, and that's gotten a little bit of traction and seems to excite people, is the one that you did with our one of our own instructors, Emily Nichols. And she made a really good point and kind of gave you a bit of an applause there in saying that what's important is that leaders take the work and their job seriously, but not take themselves too seriously. So why don't we check out that clip and then we'll chat about it.
Is there a leadership lesson that you wish people could take away with them? Just something a bit different to think about as a leader?
I don't know if it's a lesson so much as an attitude. And it's something that I think you exude. You've got to take the work seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. And I know that one of the things you've said to me about the training, I've heard you say this to some of our classes as well, is like, the first goal is don't suck. And so the great thing there is like you're taking the work seriously, but you also understand like where it fits in the bigger picture. Like it's a big deal and it's not a big deal. It's serious and it's not the end of the world. It's fun and it matters. That's a lesson I think people need more.
So this has been the thing that anyone who's known me has known about this, but Emily called it out, is because I really, as you know, I believe that a lot of things are just arbitrarily made up and they're constantly evolving. So it's not to diminish them, but therefore when we really take ourselves too seriously, we're causing a problem because the other person then feels, well, I don't know, I don't feel as strong about that, or I'm not as good as that person is. So I don't know what your take was on that episode.
Well, what I liked is not only does she say, as a leader, try not to take yourself too seriously, but she starts by saying, take the work seriously. So she's not saying just, everything's made up and nothing matters and whether you show up to work or not, it doesn't matter. She's very clear that the work still has to be taken seriously. We want to get the work done, but it's about how you, as a leader, take yourself. Are you allowed to, or are you able to take a joke? Are you able to recognize that, and probably most importantly, you're not perfect, and that's okay. You're going to make mistakes as the leader. The sign of a good leader is not that someone never messes up or never makes a mistake or never says the wrong thing. Like we see in our course, we tend to see that people define a great leader as someone who recognizes they're not perfect, but is constantly trying to get better and work on their leadership skills. And I think that's what she's pointing to here.
So it's another aspect of high performance teams is psychological safety.
Yes.
So how do you make people on the team feel comfortable either admitting mistakes or what they don't know, is that you as a leader also admit that you don't know, or that, this is a good experiment for us. This is something that I'm glad that we attempted. So anyway, I thought it's a good way of, she summarized it really well, which is take the business seriously, but not yourself.
And I think maybe a last point there that you mentioned is that it means that leadership doesn't feel so unattainable. Because if you're someone in a front, not a frontline leadership role, but if you're an employee on a team, an individual contributor or operator, if you have this leader who is so perfect and never seems to make a mistake and is always, 100% on the ball all the time, it might feel like, well, if that's how I have to be in order to be a leader myself one day, I'd almost rather not.
Right.
I'm
it's
not
unachievable.
Perfect. So this makes it much more, I think, attainable and realistic, which is great.
So even though most of the AOPs are interviewing where I have a guest, and I really love that, every once in a while I'm allowed to kind of take my own editorial topic and just talk about it. And the one that I identified to include here was this idea of how a plant manager or a site leader deals with the fact that they have all these corporate centers of excellence often who are trying to make things better, but sometimes it just runs the leader ragged. So let's have a listen. So all these groups exist primarily to offer services to the manufacturing operations. They're there to make the business better. But where things can get sort of convoluted is where the centers of excellence or support functions make demands of the operating business, the plant, the production facility, and they want them to focus on, hey, we've got this quality initiative. Hey, we've got this engineering change that we want to make. Hey, we've got this HR policy we need you to roll out. And if you think about it, all those centers of excellence, all those support functions from a corporate standpoint, they all funnel down to the plant manager or the site leader who has to play traffic cop with all these different entries or expectations.
Yeah, you bring up a great point in that video, Greg, which is that the plant manager is told, focus on what matters and kind of do the important work, while also getting pulled in these different directions by these different centers of excellence or different departments. So there really is a challenge there in order to be successful.
Yeah, and in our new Plant Manager Excellence program, we really help position the plant manager to think of yourself as the buyer or receiver of these value-added functions that might be available corporately. And if you don't do that, what will end up happening is your day will be filled with calls on all these initiatives that these corporate functions, who are trying to do a good job and add value. They have their objectives. But what you want to do is to switch it around and say, how could I best use this expertise to make my plant better? In other words, become the buyer of those services and not victimized by them.
Be a bit more discerning about what you accept in terms of help and how you ask for it and what you do with it.
And that was born out of the fact that we've been working on, like, how do you make plant managers even more effective?
Yeah.
And one of the things we see is just how they can tap into these extra resources to make their plant more effective. Yeah. Well, the next episode is really around. We had John Heffelfinger, who is a great guest, and he's in the heavy truck suspension business, and he said that it's important to reward the try, not the outcome, which is an interesting take. Let's hear what John has to say about this.
I think it is so important to reward the try and not necessarily the success of a project, but the effort. And I think that helps create more of that effort and making it visible to others. So I think it's just as important to fail, but basically reward the trial.
Yeah.
The success will come, I think. We'll learn from every trial we do. There's been so many times I've seen a mistake that I've made, missed opportunity where I could have built another leader up a little bit, and you try to make up for those later. But I would say in one line, it really comes down to rewarding the try.
So I really love this clip from John, because I think it just speaks to so much of what maybe we see not just in production facilities, but in society in general, which is we focus on the success and always kind of that final outcome, sort of like focusing on the destination rather than the journey. And what he's saying is you have so many opportunities along the way to recognize the efforts that are being made, the positive things that are happening, even if at the very end things aren't quite perfect. It's sort of like the look for times along the way to celebrate and recognize, rather than, well, at the end, things didn't go perfectly according to plan, we've got nothing to celebrate.
Yeah, I mean, I always think of those who are fans of U.S. college football. If your school is one of those powerhouse teams that's going to win almost every week anyway, so how do you just celebrate? Yeah, we crushed those guys. Yeah. It's really got to be, what is our process? Did we execute our plan the way that we wanted to? But our colleague Jason McKenzie also said there is a difference between appreciation and recognition. And appreciation is when you tell somebody how much you like how they go about doing what you've asked them to do, and then the recognition is really about the result that they generated. Right. So that's right. I think we have to remember that in the end, we're helping people do their processes better.
That's right.
And if they do those processes better, we should get better results.
That's exactly right, yeah. So our next clip that we want to look at is from James Coolidge, who both you and I know actually through some professional organizations, and you've known him for a long time. And he talks about how we're able to overcome our fear for peak performance, which is a really interesting concept, because I think on the surface, none of us think we're really afraid to be good performers or peak performers, and yet he speaks to this. So let's check that clip out and then chat about it.
And so there's those parts of just calming yourself down, grounding yourself, and reminding yourself, well, I don't know, it doesn't mean danger. Well, I don't know, it doesn't mean we're in trouble. It could also mean, and if I take time to think about it, what are the opportunities that are emerging right now? What are the ways that we can maybe scale up? We might have to shift focus, but what else could happen in that space? And how would it actually become even more profitable or more productive for our team, for our communities, or wherever our focus is, when we allow ourselves to shift from the unknown isn't bad. It could actually be really good and a great opportunity to reinvent.
I love the fact that he talks about the tendency for leaders to swarm the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like if there's a little problem, it's like dangling fresh meat in front of the leader, and we just want to bring all of our energies and resources to it.
Mm-hmm.
And he says you got to take a little bit of a longer term view.
Yeah, for sure. It's what we talk about in a lot of our podcasts, which is the idea of empowerment and accountability. If there's a problem, and like you said, the leader swarms in because it's like fresh meat and just solves the problem, I think it can create a team that becomes reliant or dependent on the leader, because they know that whenever there's a problem, Greg's just going to show up eventually. He'll smell the blood in the water and be here in a second. And also, it doesn't show from the leader's perspective that they really believe in the team to solve the problem, right? It's a chance to step back, and even though it can be frustrating and it might take a little bit more time, it's a chance to step back and say, okay, folks, we got a problem. What a good learning opportunity. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah. You know, from our frontline leadership, when we're talking about developing a very pragmatic vision in a person's department, we talk about when someone first learns how to drive, they tend to look just over the hood of the car. Therefore, their driving is jerky back and forth. And what you learn over time is to look up to the horizon. You got to look longer term. You're trying to build the capability of your team to handle these problems themselves in the future, and maybe even figure out how not to generate the problem in the first place.
Yeah, and I think too, going back to creating that dependency or giving that accountability, what can happen is if we think that as the leader we have to have all the answers and solve all the problems, whenever there's a situation where we don't have all the answers, we suddenly go, well, my authority comes from my ability to solve every problem. So if I don't know how to solve one, should I be the leader? And that's really not what leadership is. In fact, we were doing a site visit recently, and I remember talking to the plant manager about how many issues there are in a given day. They put vehicles through an assembly line, and he said, only a couple a day really. And then we got to watch one of them kind of in action. And of course, you probably remember that's when there was a problem with one of them. Well, this plant manager had only been on with the company for a short time. I think it was about a month. Yeah. And so what was really interesting was that he knew something was wrong because he was watching the people do their jobs, and he said, I think they're noticing a problem with this. But because he'd only been there a month, he wasn't able to hop in and
go. He had to defer to them.
Yeah, he didn't suddenly rip off his clothes and have a Superman outfit on and jump in and save the day. He deferred to them and said, what are you noticing?
And they did fix it.
And they didn't, I don't think they lost any respect for him that he wasn't able to fix it. They felt empowered, and it's my responsibility to take care of it. Let me take care of it. So what a great example.
Yeah, so leaders need to ask questions more than they need to make statements that solve problems. And the last episode that we're going to include in our rewind is really Beverly Byerman King, a colleague of mine. She's a certified speaking professional. I'd wanted to have her on the podcast for a while, and she hit a hot button topic, which I bet is the top search in so many ways for people who work in companies. It's how to deal with toxic employees and toxicity. So let's have a listen. What's your take on toxicity and either what causes it? What do you suggest people do about it?
First of all, don't ignore it, because the problem is we actually reinforce it a lot of times, because this person may be a high performer, yet they treat everybody else like crap around them. Your job as a leader is to protect the rest of your team. Yeah. Is to help that team to be engaged. And if something is like a poison within your team, even if it's your top performer on the team, you are better to address it and try to impact it, or to cut it away, than to let it fester and grow and impact everybody else on your team.
Yeah, that's...
So when I heard Beverly, when I heard this episode and that particular clip, what it made me think of was, I believe it's Reed Hastings, who's, I don't know if he's still the CEO of Netflix. Yeah. But what he talked about, and I think a TED Talk a long time ago, was never hire the star. And the reason he said that is because they're usually extremely intelligent and great at their job in terms of doing the work, but they're terrible team players. They have a big ego, they're overly confident, and they don't work well in teams. And what he says is all great work nowadays happens in teams. Now, I don't know how much I necessarily agree that all great work happens in teams and never hire a star performer. But I like what he's getting at there. And what I think Beverly's saying is that if you do hire someone that has maybe some of those traits that often a star performer might have, or just a toxic employee in general, you have to deal with it. As the leader, this is where your team does expect you to step in, and you don't just empower your team to deal with a toxic employee. You have to step in and take care of it.
I like how she says your job as a leader is actually to protect your team.
Yes.
And protect it makes it sound like mother hen sort of protecting, but protecting it from this toxicity that because your team looks to you and says, you're the person who can actually do something about this. I can't, I mean, I guess I could step up and try to deal with it peer to peer, but it's really not my role to tell this person that the way they're treating other team members isn't effective. So she really does say the leader has to kind of be diligent about almost surveilling when there's a toxicity and then make sure that you're confronting it. Of course, constructively.
Of course.
But really it's your job to protect the team.
And what I also think is interesting there is that for a lot of people, the leader sets the tone for the team, creates the culture of what's acceptable and what's unacceptable. Now, there's employee handbooks and policies and bylaws that might state specifically, oh, this is abuse or harassment. But at the end of the day, it's far less about those words written in some manual on the shelf and far more about what the leader allows to happen or continue to happen. And so I think it speaks even more to Beverly's point that if there's problems like this happening on the team, if there's toxic behaviors, everyone's not going, well, that person will stop because in bylaw 6230 or policy number 7, it says to. Instead, they're going to look to the leader and go, well, if the leader's allowing this to happen, does that mean that we're supposed to all do it that way? Or that the leader maybe actually even values that toxic trait? And I think we all know it's not, but it's often from a place of fear to go, well, what happens if I, if I deal with this, am I going to get a lot of pushback and whatnot? So you got to have the courage to step up to those toxic behaviors.
Right, and know that it's not an easy conversation to have, and it's not even a guaranteed outcome, but you have the power to do something, and if you don't, it's negligence.
Yeah. And I think one of the neat things that we teach in our course is that we talk about addressing behavior and performance issues, and one of the things most of our instructors say during that time is we're going to teach you this conversation method to make it easier to give that feedback and try to correct the behavior, but don't think that there's this silver bullet that if I just say things in exactly the right way, that someone will suddenly go, by golly, you know what? I am toxic and I'm just going to stop.
That's right.
It might be multiple conversations and you might start by tweaking one small behavior knowing that there's 7 more small behaviors behind it.
And often when you do correct someone's behavior, at first they'll go, well, fine, I'll do it. Just because other people are overly sensitive. And then you're hoping that the light switch or the light bulb turns on when they realize, no, this is a better way of interacting with my team. And it doesn't matter how good I am at it. If I'm hard to deal with or hard to work with, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. And honestly, it's going to hold back the whole team's productivity. You know what? It's been great to do this look back on the Accelerating Operational Performance podcast. You know, we do these podcasts because we want to give you what you need to get, that small 1% better increment. So
exactly.
If you can be, we'd love to have you join us as a subscriber, as they say in the podcast business.
Like and follow.
Smash that subscribe button, and tell your friends about it as well. So Kirk, it's been great to look back on
likewise.
these episodes.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this. Thanks, Greg.